If you can stand, please stand, remove your cover for an invocation from Father William Zavasky, pastor of St. James Catholic Church.
And let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you this day for this cool memorial celebration. We ask you on this special day to help us be grateful for the men and women who have served our nation. Let them know we are filled with gratitude for all they have done for each and every one of us to give us the freedoms we enjoy as this United States. In a special way, also loving God, we ask you to welcome into your kingdom those men and women who have given their lives in the service of our nation. You have told us that no greater love can this be than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Help us this day to truly be grateful for those men and women who have given their lives for this nation. And all of this we ask in God's name, amen. Amen.
Now, if you could please stay standing and face the flag, we're going to have the Star Spangled Banner sung by the Metropolis Limelight Singers, led by lead voice Tiffany Gates.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you to those ladies for that wonderful rendition. We want to welcome everybody here today. This is the 145th anniversary or celebration of Memorial Day in the United States. And it's dedicated to, first, the parade is honoring all our living veterans, but this ceremony is dedicated to honoring all those who gave their lives in the fight for freedom. And those young men and women throughout the ages are represented here in various ways. In Arlington Heights, we have 58 of those young men who sacrificed their lives for our nation. We call them Arlington's Fallen Heroes. There are 58 going from the Civil War all the way through the war in Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom. And we want to welcome everybody today, but we have a special welcome for the families of several of our fallen heroes. We have the family of Richard J. Adam from World War II, Wilbert Henry Gieske from World War II. From Vietnam, we have the family of Harry Lee Craig, Donald Allen Klarber, William Carl Dabbert, Robert Frew, and from the wars, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Robert Newgard, and from Operation Enduring Freedom, James Bray Stack. To those families who have lost their sons in the cause of freedom, we make a promise, and we do this every year as a tradition. The town, the community of Arlington Heights makes a very solemn promise that as long as there's one veteran living in our community or one patriotic person living in this town, we promise that your sons will always be honored and they'll never, ever be forgotten. That is our promise. We also want to thank the many hundreds of people who donated money or supported this particular ceremony and the parade There's so many that we can't call them out specifically, but in the ceremony program that you either have with you or will be online, page 4 of that program lists all these wonderful people out so that they can be thanked. Also today, we're very honored to have with us today Senator Mark Kirk. And our Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. And I think I saw our Illinois State Senator Matt Murphy. I think he was out here somewhere. All right, from the U.S. military, we're very honored today to have the commander of the United States Army 85th Support Command, Brigadier General Gracchus Dunn, behind me. Also, U.S. Army Reserve Ambassador Bill Hawes. And standing tall and looking good over here to the right, to my right, is the United States Navy Recruit Training Command Drill Team, led by a Petty Officer Banks. Very, very honored to have him here. From the village of Arlington Heights, we have Mayor Tom Hayes. And I know we have a number of our village trustees. Well, I'll just say that they're out there. From the Arlington Park District, Mary Fran Leno is the president. I believe she's here. And if not, I know a number of our Park District commissioners are here, as is from the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, the Elementary School District 25 Board, and also the High School District 214 Board of Education, and then the Wheeling Township. The supervisor, Michael Schrader, is somewhere out there, I know. Thank you for coming. And from our veterans organizations, we're very proud to have from the Arlington Post 981 of the VFW, we have Chuck Shields behind me. He's waving there. From the American Legion Post 208 here in Arlington Heights, we have past Commander Tom Fogelstadt behind me. From the Northwest Suburban Marine Corps League, we have the Commandant, Al Colliget. I know you're here, Al. Where are you? There he is. The Marines are always hiding back there. And from the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 311, we have the President, Alan Van Bladel. Alan, he's back there. Thank you for coming. We'll move on to our welcomes. First, Chuck Shields from the VFW Post 981. Chuck?
Thank you for coming. Arlington Post 981 is proud to sponsor this parade. 238 years ago, first American veterans gave up their lives for freedom. They were honored by statues and plaques. It wasn't until modern time that a day was set aside to remember and give homage to those who sacrificed, some giving their all for our freedom. Many of us consider Memorial Day a day to picnic and relax. We, including myself, lose the significance of this day. In 1946, 15 million veterans were home in the USA. Today, less than 3 million remain. Since that time, thousands have added from Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and this battle is going on, but under different names. The importance of this day has not changed to remember and honor our veterans. I salute you for your service and sacrifice. Thank you.
We will also have a welcome on behalf of the Village of Arlington Heights by our new mayor, Tom Hayes.
Well, thank you, Greg. Distinguished guests, especially those who have served, those who are currently serving, and of course their families. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, on behalf of the Village Board and the citizens we represent, it is my honor to officially welcome you to Memorial Park this morning. In a community where many have answered the call to serve others, we gather here today to honor and remember those who answered the ultimate call to duty, honor, and country in the defense of freedom. From the Civil War in the 1860s to the current war in Afghanistan, Arlington Heights residents have answered that call for more than 150 years. In order to help us to remember that history, we have incorporated a timeline of the wars, conflicts, and operations in which our residents have fought, and in some cases died, in over those years into our central plaza right over here in the central part of the park. And I would encourage you to spend time over in that area, visiting and reflecting on that timeline and what it represents, either before you leave here today or whenever you can come back and visit this park in the days to come. While many of those we remember today were part of what has become now known as the greatest generation, I can't help but wonder who out in the audience today will answer the call to become part of the next great generation of Americans, to enthusiastically accept the call to defend our great country and the freedoms we enjoy. For in the words of General Douglas MacArthur, it is the soldier who practices the greatest act of religious training, sacrifice. And it is the soldier who is called upon to offer and give his or her life for their country, who is the noblest development of mankind. Thank you again for joining us today to help honor and remember those noble soldiers who answered the call and sacrificed all so that we might live free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. Just a little note, we have a very special flag unit here that you see behind you lining the path up to the central plaza of our park. This is the honor flag unit that was sponsored by the Gluckert's Funeral Home folks. Each flag represents a veteran or a patriot that a family wanted to remember and honor in this parade. So each one of those flags represents a person, someone who served and sacrificed, and they're here today for that honor. Our next part of our presentation today is something very special. Senator Mark Kirk is going to present a Bronze Star to a family of a veteran.
Good morning, Arlington Heights. Shout out if you were part of the United States Army. Okay, good to hear that. If you are a United States Marine, shout out. Hoorah! Good to hear that. If you were ever part of the finest naval force to ever be in the 7 seas, we got some Navy support. You guys, this is your cue. Yeah. And good to hear. Remember, you Marines, the Navy is more than just a taxi service to hell. I am here for the first time. I'm sorry, last year I missed my time here because I am in love with Arlington Heights. This place is pretty much the center of normality on planet Earth. Never have I seen a community that is so supportive of the men and women who back our nation. And for those folks that I see who are wearing the uniform, you all know what I have experienced, that key moment when you wear the uniform and know that you will give up everything for this country, which is the greatest force for human dignity and everyone rising to their potential, regardless of race, creed, or origin. Think about how good you guys all look out there. And especially, I want a round of applause for the greatest generation guys who saved civilization. Yeah. We're losing 2,000 of you a day. And just want to thank you guys, fighting enemies of the United States on 2 fronts and beating both of them, and pretty soundly. Pretty amazing to think about what those absolutely lovable guys did. And I just met some of our Vietnam cadre, and just want to thank you guys. Round of applause for our Vietnam guys. Sometimes they were not properly thanked, and I talked to one or two who said even in the airport somebody might say something mean to them. And thank you for going all the way to Southeast Asia and serving the United States. We are proud of you guys.
Hoorah!
Thank you, guys. Thanks. Someone once asked me what was the difference between Jan. You can check me out on this. Democrats and Republicans. Democrats say, "Okay, let's rock and roll," and Republicans say, "Okay, let's lock and load."
I like that.
I think Jan will back me up on that, especially the rock and roll side of it. All right, I am here to honor Edward Arthur Field, whose name wasn't entirely correct on his DD-214. As you guys know, that never happens. The DD-214 is always absolutely correct. For those civilians in the audience, the DD-214 is your discharge paper. And, you know, as we say in the Navy, sometimes we do more paperwork by 8 a.m. on Monday than most people in a whole week. We've got a bronze star that we tracked down for Edward's son, who is here to receive it. Let me tell you about Edward in his service to the country. He was drafted from Chicago and ended up serving in the Pacific Theater. Edward, as my father used to say, as a draftee, he was tested. A lot of you guys, I think, went through this. The smart ones went into the finance corps, which is where Edward went, sitting on that big pile of cash. They only would give it to the smart kid. Unfortunately, Edward has passed away in 1972, and his family is here to honor him. Round of applause for the Field family. Now let's hear from his son to talk about Dad and how he saved civilization.
Well, our father enjoyed his years in the Army, and so much so that he volunteered for the Army of Occupation after the war. He would have stayed in the Army longer, however, our mother had other thoughts on that. His oldest child, my brother, is a 1966 graduate of the Naval Academy and spent 28 years flying F-14s in the Navy. And we're all very, his son is currently a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and commands a squadron of helicopters in the Pacific.
3 generations of military backup in the Field family.
So we're all very proud of him, and on behalf of my brother and my sister, Senator, thank you very much for this honor.
Thank you very much, Senator Kirk, Mr. Field, for your grandfather's service, or your father's service to our nation. Now, as a special treat, we have the Memorial Day Choir, who is going to sing for us the service songs, the songs of each of the military services. And for all those veterans and active duty folks out there, if you should feel so moved, please stand up when your service song is sung. The choir is led by Henry Kogler.
Army
thanks to the men and women of the Memorial Day Choir. They come from churches and schools from all over Arlington Heights. Henry Kogler and the Metropolis Performing Arts Center folks have brought them together and made that happen. They did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. This year, 2013, is very special for three reasons. Number one, 60 years ago was the signing of the Korean War armistice that ended the hostilities in that war. 40 years ago, the last combat troops from the United States left Vietnam. And today, we still have our young men and women serving in harm's way in Afghanistan. In honor of those three events, or those three things, we have a veteran from each one of those conflicts to tell us a little bit about what it means to them. From the Korean War, we have our own Wally Lichfager, who was a Korean War veteran. He actually carried a BAR throughout Korean War and was back here in Arlington Heights very soon thereafter to become commander of our VFW Post 981. Then we have from the Vietnam War, William, or Bill Dusling, who was a young captain in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. He was flying slicks, or helicopters, in the worst of the fighting there. And then we have our own Court Harris, young D. Court Harris, who is the son of David Harris here in Arlington Heights. He grew up here in Arlington, went to St. Vitus, went to the United States Military Academy, and served in the United States Army, most recently in Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom. We'll hear from each one of those gentlemen now.
The Korean War was often called the Forgotten War. It has always been said that the World War II was to end all wars. However, just 4 years and 9 months later, the Korean War began. North Korean troops invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950. A 17-country United Nations force, almost half of them American, responded. They drove back the invaders, but the Chinese became allied to the North Koreans and also entered the war against the UN troops. Some very intense fighting continued until 1953. It was never classified as a war, but it was considered a police action. However, it was a war, and there were a lot of men that would attest to that. Those that served there, those who were on the front line, the wounded, and especially those whose voice is now silent, the captured and those that died there. And, of course, we must also remember their families. This was America's first no-win, limited, undeclared war, just a conflict. The wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there is still some debate that the war was unconstitutional. An ominous precedent costing 52,426 American lives and thousands of prisoners of war. After the ending of the hostilities, there was an exchange of prisoners of war, but the fate of many Americans listed as captured or missing in action is another of Korean War's unresolved issues. According to the information from the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Washington, D.C., 8,100 Americans who fought in the war are still unaccounted for, some of them my friends. But the war ended with a political agreement that had both sides pull back from the demilitarized zone. It wasn't really a peace settlement. After the induction into the Army, I was assigned to the 45th Division, the famed Thunderbird Division. And after receiving my basic training at Camp Polk, Louisiana, the division received orders for overseas duties. We were loaded on a World War II Kaiser troop ship, went through the Panama Canal, and took almost 30 days to reach our destination, Hokkaido, the northern island of Japan, for occupation of that island and to defend it from the feared communist invasion. While there, we received our advanced basic training. After completion of that training, the unit was shipped to Korea. I had been selected to the liaison team for the division to complete a smooth transition in the placement of our unit with the unit we would be replacing on the front line. I arrived at the front line on Thanksgiving Day 1951. The remainder of our unit arrived about a week later, and completion of the transfer of the frontline positions with the 1st Cavalry Division was finalized. We defended those frontline positions as well as our assigned outposts for the remainder of our tour of duty, with the exception of about 3 weeks when we were placed in frontline reserves for relief from the stress which most of us were experiencing. To this day, the remaining 45th Division soldiers who fought in Korea speak with respect of the land west of Chorwan, where we battled with the communists at close range. In every battle and skirmish, we were almost always completely outnumbered. At one time, we were so outnumbered that it was necessary to have our own artillery shell our own positions. The men in our unit would be comparatively safe in the sturdy bunkers we had built, and hopefully the airbursts would hinder the advancement of the enemy. It did help to some extent, but the battle still had some serious consequences. Overall, and thankfully though, we were better equipped and had better training and leadership. I left the front line in Korea on the day I should have been discharged and arrived back in the United States on October 1952. There were no parades or welcoming committees to greet the Korean War veterans when we returned. The government furnished me with transportation to Chicago, but I had to buy my own train ticket to Arlington Heights. Since being at home, I have tried to put many of these events behind me, but some instances are indelibly present. In conclusion, I would like to share with you a letter of appreciation that I received 10 years ago to mark the anniversary of the beginning of that war from the President of South Korea. I will read it in English. On the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War, I would like to offer you my deepest gratitude for your noble contribution to the efforts to safeguard the Republic of Korea and uphold liberal democracy around the world. At the same time, I remember with endless respect and affection those who sacrificed their lives for that cause. We Koreans hold dear in our hearts conviction, courage, and spirit of sacrifice shown to us by the selfless friends as you, who enabled us to remain a free, democratic nation. The ideals of democracy for which you were willing to sacrifice your will all 50 years ago have become universal values in this century and millennium. Half a century after the Korean War, we honor you and reaffirm our friendship, which helped to forge the blood alliance between our two countries. And we resolve once again to work with our friendly nations for the good of humankind and peace in the world. I thank you again for your noble sacrifice and pray for your health and happiness. Sincerely yours, signed Kim Dae-jung, President of South Korea, President of the Republic of Korea. Unfortunately, one day each year, Memorial Day, is dedicated to honoring the ultimate sacrifice made by the Americans in all wars. But to many Americans, this day is just the beginning of the barbecue season or stores to have super sales and the first holiday weekend after a long winter. The names of the deceased are not just names, they are people. And although we are remembering and honoring those veterans from our community, I would like also to remember my friends who served with me, and especially those of my unit that were killed, captured, or wounded during that conflict. Today, 60 years after the armistice that ended the hostilities, U.S. troops remain stationed in South Korea to counter the continuing military threat posed by North Korea. On this Memorial Day, it is only fitting that we give thanks to God for those in the armed forces of all wars who served this country to preserve our nation and her liberties. However, every day should be Memorial Day. Thank you, and God bless America.
My time as a Vietnam veteran began on August 8, 1968, when a TWA commercial jet took off from Cam Ranh Bay, South Vietnam, headed to Seattle, Washington, and then to San Francisco. I had just completed my year tour as a helicopter pilot. As the plane took off, there was great cheering and excitement from those on board. We were safe, we were alive, we're headed home. On our approach to a stop in Guam, there was an announcement that suggested we change from our fatigues to civilian clothes for the return to the States, and that we would be landing about midnight in Seattle. And that we would be, why change clothes? Why were we landing at midnight? The reason we found out for changing clothes and arriving at midnight was to avoid protesters that might be there. Wait a minute. We just completed a dangerous tour in a war zone. We were proud of our service. I don't remember anyone on the plane changing clothes. We arrived in Seattle around midnight. No protesters were there. In the early morning, I flew to San Francisco to meet my wife, still in combat fatigues. The looks I got at San Francisco airport and the words directed at me, warmonger, baby killer, bigot, caused me great confusion. I just completed my tour and what the country asked me to do. I was in harm's way for a year. My family was inconvenienced and worried for a year. What's going on? The Vietnam War era was a time of extreme confusion for this country. And for those of us that served in Vietnam, the treatment we received upon return caused us great confusion. What have we done wrong? Why is my service not appreciated? I did what was asked of me. I was welcomed home by my wife and family, and the joy of being home safely seemed to be enough. I pretty much put that part of my life behind me. But there's a part of me that felt saddened that my service and that of others of Vietnam veterans was not appreciated. Prior to last year's Memorial Day parade, Greg Pettivone asked me to march in the parade, and that he was seeking other Vietnam veterans to do that. Greg's invitation awakened something long in my heart, feeling some need for appreciation of my service, so I did agree to march. On the day of the parade, I was amazed at the number of Vietnam veterans that were assembled for the march. The conversations were amazing. Memories were clear about the time spent there and things that happened. The finest words expressed is when a veteran shook your hand and said, "Welcome home." Eyes misted, and the same words were said in return. The parade started. My daughter and her husband and 2 children marched with me. I was stunned by the people along the parade route. They were standing and clapping for us. I saw so many mouth the words, "Welcome home," and "Thank you." All I could do was mouth the same words back. Last year's parade and outpouring of gratitude by those observing the parade made me feel welcomed home, and it closed a loop in my life. I was truly home. I've always been proud of my service and the service of other veterans, and have supported veteran groups over the years. What I did not realize is the profound impact that the 2 words, "welcome home," would have on me. So I offer these same words to all our veterans. To our World War II veterans, welcome home. To veterans of the Korean War, welcome home. To my brothers from Vietnam, welcome home. To veterans of Desert Storm, welcome home. To veterans of Restore Hope Somalia, welcome home. To veterans of Deliberate Forces Bosnia, welcome home. Veterans of Allied Force Kosovo, welcome home. veterans of Iraqi freedom, welcome home. To veterans of enduring freedom, welcome home. Your service is greatly appreciated. Thank you. God bless you. Welcome home.
Thank you for giving me the privilege of speaking on such an important day. You know, I can't remember a time in my military career where I was given a microphone and members of Congress and general officers were forced to listen. So I promise to be short, 15 or 20 minutes max. It's good to see Senator Kirk out here. Let me share with you a quick story. The last time I saw Senator Kirk, was actually in Afghanistan in August of 2011. While his colleagues in the Congress were on their vacations, Senator Kirk put on his hat as a U.S. naval commander and was in Afghanistan helping with intelligence on tracking down drug lords across the country. And we were able to share meals in Afghanistan in Kabul at NATO headquarters. So Senator Kirk, thank you for embodying the motto, leading from the front. Last year on Memorial Day, I was at Forward Operating Base Arena outside Herat, Afghanistan, in the western part of the country, about 60 miles from Iran. Over dinner with some Italian and Spanish colleagues of mine, I attempted to explain to them the concept of our Memorial Day, about how it's a national holiday, about how families in towns across the country gather and take pause to remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice so we can enjoy beer, brats, barbecue, and the beginning of summer. I wish we had that, one of them said with envy, because they have holidays celebrating their independence. They have days recognizing the different branches of their armed forces, but the concept of Memorial Day as we know it here is unique. And that's what makes our country the greatest in the history of the world, that we have this holiday and that it started with people like you, because Memorial Day began at the community level as a local observance years before it was recognized nationally. Almost 7,000 service members have paid the ultimate sacrifice in our most recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Men like Lieutenant Tyler Parton, a West Point classmate of mine, who was a musician and had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Men like Arlington Heights native Lance Corporal James Stack, who was a champion air pistol shooter and had taken part in the Junior Olympics. Lieutenant Parton, Lance Corporal Stack, along with all the others, they could have done anything in life, but they decided to join the armed forces and serve our country. And as I look out there today and see all of you, I know that their sacrifice is not forgotten or taken for granted. That acknowledgement from you, the relationship between our citizens and our men and women in uniform, and your understanding of the price we pay for the freedoms we enjoy, that is what I believe the Italian soldier was envious of. So as we prepare to place wreaths in memory of our honored veterans and fallen heroes, we remember the almost 7,000 service members who have died in conflict in the Middle East. Never forget, while many of these brave men and women died protecting one another, all of them served so that we could keep the things that we love the most: God, country, and family. Today, we honor their sacrifice. Thank you.
Our thanks to Wally Lichfager, Bill Dusling, and Court Harris for those very profound words on this day. Our next section of our ceremony is a tradition here in Arlington Heights. Each year we collect the names of those who have served our country and who have passed away in the last 12 months. We call these honored veterans, Arlington's honored veterans, and we read their names at the Memorial Day ceremony in tribute to their service to our nation. Today, Tom Fogelstad, past commander of American Legion Post 208, will read those 170 names. They're contained in the program of today's ceremony. They're also posted online at the Memorial Park website on the Arlington Heights Park website. Commander Fogelstad.
Thank you, Greg. Stowe H. Allen, Richard Amundsen, Roy V. Anderson, Rudolph Arena Sr., Marlon R. Bankert, Harold R. Barfus, Charles Richard Barton, Charles O. Bennett, Earl W. Benoche II, Richard J. Boyardi, Louis Bowles, Herman F. Boyd, Raymond V. Brannick, Elroy Bruscher, John R. Brooks, Barry O. Bruno, Florence Moore Bussieri, Robert O. Buckingham, Douglas E. Burke, Paul F. Callistro, Robert J. Callahan, Austin J. Callahan, Robert P. Carriger, Tony Crawford, Robert S. Zarnick, Lester C. Danders, Albert John DeVries Jr., George DeLello, Robert W. Dillon, Danny DeMio, William H. Dolan, Frank J. DeRoba, Richard J. Dvoracek Sr., Eugene T. Entrican, John D. Falls, Walter Flores, Robert Bruce Fraley, Raymond P. Frederick, Carl B. Jenrick Jr., Wendell I. Giles, Arthur G. Glafke, Gordon D. Good, Stanley L. Gorski, Robert M. Gosh, Wilbert H. Grant, Thomas H. Grieger, Leroy A. Hamilton, Stephen Harkos, Bernard E. Hardy, Avery E. Harris, William M. Hennessy, Robert M. Henry, Robert A. Hedsky, Joseph Higgs, George Nett, James R. Holm, Alfred S. Holzinger, Edward G. Hopper, Robert E. Inglis, William R. Iverson, Thomas H. Jacobs, George E. John, Timothy J. Joyce, Loy R. Youngman, Donald J. Kay, John H. Keel, Wayne A. Knutkowski, Irvin F. Kosh, Raymond C. Kosh, Kenneth Korn, John A. Kostovich, Paul E. Krizer, William A. Kruer, James G. Kuhar, Kenneth A. Kylo Sr., Anthony A. LaBarbera, Gerald D. Larkin, Joseph J. LaRusso, Michael A. Layden, Michael A. Lahore, Louis F. Lecan, James J. Lellman, Adolph L. Lipianka, Ralph T. Lidge, Harold J. Latuski, Clarence J. Lobel, James M. Lord, Donald R. Ludwig, Edward Lee Majewski, Richard B. Malinowski, Dale L. Marshall, James R. Paschal, Carl H. Pasquale, Alex Pulowski, Roger A. Peterson, Francis W. Trungaro, Paul G. Phillip, Olaf Y. Picat, William C. Polson, Donald L. Prims, Robert W. Perconier, Arthur Rasmussen, Robert W. Rick, Fred J. Rydell, Michael C. Ryan, Robert C. F. Rongi, Arnold M. Rustin, Martin A. Roots, Henry J. Ryan, Henry Sanchez, Marvin Schaefer, John Schmidt, Philip F. Schoen, Lester T. Schwartz, T. Patrick Schumann, Richard M. Slezak, Donald E. Smith, Burton J. Soderberg, Robert D. Soyen, Herbert D. Spencer, George A. Steele, Robert W. Stenstrom, Stuart Stevenson, William L. Stutzman, Stanley A. Smerek, Craig J. Thompson, John F. Stipsword Sr., Walter Tobleski, Peter V. Toffoli, Dennis D. Huholski, Frank P. Venturini, Richard Vissian, Kenneth W. Wall, Vernon E. Vandersea, Robert Otto Warnecki, Raymond C. Weber, John E. Weidel, William J. Wimmer, Ralph A. Windheim, Harry D. Wiswell, and lastly, Norman E. Wright. May they rest in peace.
Thank you, Commander Fogelstad. Those are the veterans of our community who passed away in the last 12 months, and we very much thank their families for their service. Now there's the last of our traditions, which is to read the names of the 58 young men from our town who grew up here, joined the military, went off to war, and died in the service of their nation. We call these young men Arlington's fallen heroes. From the Civil War, Jacob Sigwald. From the Civil War, Walter J. Kennicott. From the Spanish-American War, George R. Bray. From the World War I, Theodore Heemsmuth, David H. Hodges. From World War II, Warren T. Umbright, John B. Hatch, John J. Nickel, Norman W. Beasy, Douglas F. Milligan, Richard J. Adam, Paul E. Pingle, Theodore H. Meyer, John J. Deutsch, Franklin J. Bublitz, Lyle F. Shane, George F. Grossi, August B. Bunsick, Joseph J. Soyen, Paul W. Wood, Jr., Eugene M. Potter, James H. Kellogg, Edward G. Deary, Howard P. Crerer, C.W. Samuelovich, James C. Scott, Robert R. Gardner, Wilbert W. Behrens, and his brother, Albert G. Behrens, Morris Bow, Elvern Anderson, Jr., David Goodlett, Warren J. Henkin, the family of Wilbert Gieske will ring the bell. Then there is Lester Bennett, Harry Fryermuth, Maurice Sheenan, Adolph H. Bussey, Jr., Anthony Scalero, Richard F. Lacina, Raymond C. Peters, and Arthur Niebuhr. From the Korean War, Frank E. Blumenschein, John P. Martin, Jr. From the Vietnam War, Sammy L. Hartzell, Robert E. Barduck. David R. Shuren. And the family of Harry Craig will ring the bell for Harry Lee Craig. Douglas D. Vaughn and the family of William Dabbert will ring the bell for their son, William Carl Dabbert. Donald Allen Klarber, Robert F. Conti, Scott N. Jacobson. From Operation Desert Shield, Bradley R. Schult. From Operation Iraqi Freedom, Paul R. Syverson, Andrew K. Stern, and William R. Newgard. From Operation Enduring Freedom, the family of James Bray Stack will ring the bell. James Bray Stack. These are Arlington's 58 fallen heroes and their families. We thank them for their service and for their sacrifice. Our final element today is the placing of wreaths at the eternal flame, the bronze flame that stands 15 feet tall. That is Arlington Heights' symbol of our long and enduring dedication to remembering and honoring our veterans. As our wreath layers line up, each of them will be escorted by the U.S. Navy Rifle Squad that is here today with us. And along the route, their route will be lined by the flags of the Honor Flag Unit sponsored by Gluckert Primo Home. Our first wreath layer is from the 85th Support Command of the United States Army. Carrying the wreath are Brigadier General Gracchus K. Dunn and Army Reserve Ambassador from Illinois, William Hawes. Our next wreath layer is from Arlington Post 981 of the VFW, Chuck Shields, Commander. Our next wreath is presented by the Northwest Suburban Detachment 80 of the Marine Corps League, Alfred Colleget, Commandant. Our next wreath is from the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 311, presented by George Weissman, Vietnam veteran. Our next wreath is presented by the American Legion Auxiliary Unit 208, Lois Kurowski, President, escorted by Gene Farringer, Commander of the American Legion Post 208 Color Guard. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the people of the village of Arlington Heights by Thomas Hayes, Mayor. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Arlington Heights Police Department by Crime Stopper Officer of the Year, Detective Russ Mendel. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Arlington Heights Fire Department by Lieutenant Dwayne Wood and firefighter E.J. Mampy. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Arlington Heights Park District by Rob Nesvisil, Commissioner. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Arlington Heights Park District Foundation by Mike Gordon, President. Our next wreath is presented by the Arlington High School alumni, class of 1964, by Tom Farguson, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, on behalf of their classmates, William Dabbert and Robert Conti. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Lions Club of Arlington Heights by Greg Andrzejewski, President. Our next wreath is presented on behalf of the Republicans of Wheeling Township by D. Court Harris, Captain, United States Army, retired veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom. Our final wreath is presented on behalf of the Wheeling Township Democrats by Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky and Fred Arenas, Staff Sergeant, United States Air Force, retired. Before we close our ceremony, we'd just like to remember or remind all the veterans and active duty personnel who are present here today, all the veterans and active duty personnel, after the ceremony, we'd like you to gather around the eternal flame for our annual Remembering Our Veterans photo. It's something we do as a tradition here in Arlington Heights every year to honor our veterans and active duty folks. To close our ceremony, we will have a 21-gun salute, followed by taps, followed by the closing prayer. Ready the rifle squad, ready the bugler.
Gracious God, help us this day to always remember and never forget those names we have mentioned and held in our heart in gratitude for their service to our country. Amen.
Thank you all for coming. All our veterans and active duty folks, if you could please assemble at the Eternal Flame. We'd like you there for our annual Remembering Our Veterans photo. Thank you all very much for coming.